All right, Photoshop folks, we are going to look at some things off of Photoshop note sheet number 2 regarding brushes, shapes, and patterns. And we've spent some time with shapes, so I think you have a good understanding of shapes. However, we're going to look at brushes and patterns and adding some layer styles and doing some things with that. So we're going to get into Photoshop, and you are going to do this with me, although as we do certain things, you can choose like different brushes or different patterns or different fonts or whatever. You don't have to use the same things that I use, just the same concepts. We're going to create a new document, change it to pixels first, and we want it 700 wide, 500 high, 150. Let's go background white for now, and there we go. So here is our document, and we're going to start off by creating a patterned background. So over here underneath the gradient tool, which if you can't find, just press the letter G, is a paint bucket tool. We did use this before to fill in with a pattern, so you should be familiar with the process here. You click on the drop down and choose pattern. In the past, we've chosen the built-in patterns that come with it. So there's a variety of categories here. However, you can also load patterns. Or for that matter, you can create your own pattern and then use your own pattern. But when you load a pattern, you have to load what's called a PAT file. So see over here, it says PAT. So there are places online that you can go to download pattern files. I also have some out on the Skinner classes folder. So if you go out to the Z drive, Skinner classes, and Photoshop, there should be a folder here for patterns, and you can see I've put a bunch of pattern files in here, and they are PAT files. PAT files. So I have a whole bunch that I've put in here. You can also download them from various websites. One of those is brushlovers.com, and if you click on patterns, then you can see here are just a whole variety of patterns. There's a couple of pages of patterns. So let's say I want to mess around with this one. I'm going to click PS Patterns Pack number 2 and click on it. Click on the free download. Just like fonts, these are going to come downloaded as zip files. Those are zipped together and they look like these with zippers on them. I'm just going to download it to my desktop and I'll delete it later. Once you click on the zipped file, it's going to open in a window and you're going to have to extract the file. So you click extract, let it go to the desktop, just let everything go to the desktop. And then you should end up with a folder on your desktop that has this PAT file in it. Now don't double click it, so it's not like fonts. You don't double click these. You could make you a folder, so like I could come over here to my U drive, which I have a big old U drive here, to my Photoshop folder for this semester, which is 19, and I could just drag it into my 19 folder. So I'm going to take this and drag it into my Photoshop folder. That way it's there and it's ready for me. And it copies it over, so now it's in there. So now if I come in here, I can click my drop down arrow next to pattern, click on the gear, and I'm going to load. And I'm going to go to my U drive because I popped it into my Photoshop folder. And there it is. There's my PAT file. When I click load, it loads in here. So you can see there's the hearts one, and here's the other two. In order to use these, of course, just double click one, come over here and click, and it puts it in there. Now notice this one is really, really, really big. And such is the case with patterns. Sometimes you have control over the size of the patterns. Sometimes you do not. It just depends on how they are created. You can also create new patterns. You can delete patterns. There's all those different options. So let me undo that one because that one clearly is not going to be very useful for us. And then I can try another. Now the cool thing about patterns when it comes to using them as a layer style, so see when I put this in here like this, when I put them in here like this, there's not much control over what size they are. If I have a shape and I draw a pattern, so I'm going to take a rectangle and just drag it across down here at the bottom, then I can, hold on, my rectangle has a stroke and a no fill. So let's say I don't want to have a stroke on here, and for the fill for now I'll just choose like red or something. Alright, so I've got my rectangle on here, but I'm going to add a layer style. So FX button is layer style, and there's one called pattern overlay. Now in here I can load patterns, so there's the ones I already loaded. You can see the hearts and the lines and the dots. In here though, you can hit the scale button and scale it down. So I can make it bigger or smaller just straight within here under scale. So that's going to be kind of the easier way to do that. Now bear in mind, this is a black and white pattern. And so I can't see through it because it's black and solid white, and it actually completely overtook my rectangle. You can mess with the blending mode. This is how this interacts with what's underneath it. So you can mess with that. Overlay is one that it puts it over the top of it. Soft light, linear, dodge. So you can see like this one actually flips it, and so there's a red. Some of these don't do a whole lot because of the black and whiteness of it. But see, this linear burn one gave me my red back, and then now I can see my black on top of there. So as you scroll through these, you just have different ones. Multiply. Probably the most common ones are multiply, screen, and overlay that you would use. But normal is what it's going to default to. So I'm going to have you now do what I just did. So we want to go ahead and create a rectangle. I don't care what color you make it. And then go ahead and add your pattern and go pick a pattern. And then let's scale it down so that it fits nicely into this and hit OK. Then once you do that, you're going to add your name. So I'm going to take my name. First name is fine. Let's use a fatter font. I don't care what font you use. Just make sure it's something kind of chunky. So this is good. Spicy Rice is the one I've got here. And about yay big. Again, I don't care about the specific size, but we're going to put it down here. And then finally, let's go ahead and give it the same pattern. You can copy a layer style. So I'm going to right click here and copy the layer style. And then come to this layer, right click in the gray space and paste the layer style. Now it has the exact same layer style, so it's got that same pattern in there. I'm going to go ahead and also add a stroke to this one around the outside edge. Make it black to match the color of the pattern. And then scale it up a little bit. All right, so your turn. You can pause this at this point if you haven't already. And go ahead and we need the rectangle. We need your name that has copied and pasted that layer style, and then add a nice little stroke to that. Then come back and join me when you're ready. Okay, so moving on. As we all know, when you create a shape, it is a shape layer. It has this funny little icon. When you create text, it's a text layer. It has this funny little icon. However, when we brush something with paintbrush, it won't let us do that on text layers, and it won't let us do that on shape layers because you have to have a rasterized layer in order to paint. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to click on my top layer and hit the blank layer button to make a new layer. And then I'm going to paint on this layer with my paintbrush. Now I have loaded up this paint here from Wet Media Brushes called Kyle Ultimate Inking Thick and Thin. I don't know if you have that exact same brush. You probably do. But it's a wet media brush, so it should look wet. You've got some different ones in here. All right, so I've got that in here. I'm going to click on my top color box and use my eyedropper to steal this red color. And then I'm just going to paint in the corner a couple of little lines. So 1, 2, we'll do that over here too. 1, 2, like so. Notice that these are brush strokes. And they are all kind of glued together because they're all on one layer. Because whenever you draw with a paintbrush, it does not create its own layer. Shapes create their own layer. Text creates its own layer, but brushes do not create their own layer. If we drag something in from somewhere else, that creates its own layer. So you've got all those different ways to create layers, but brushes are not going to let you do that. Okay? So next thing here, we're going to take this text, and I want to punch out a couple of little holes. And I want to do that with a special brush. So I'm going to come back in here. Just like you can download patterns, you can download brushes. So myphotoshopbrushes.com, I've got some brushes in here that I can use. I'm going to click more free brushes because those are the featured ones. Now because I know I want to punch a letter out, I want kind of a fat brush. Like these are going to be intricate. I want something kind of simple. I'll just take these leaves. So I'm going to download this leaf one from here, hit download. Again, it's a zip. I'm going to put it on the desktop. I'm going to click it and extract it. So here's the extract and just hit OK. All right, and so now it's extracted. Again, it's in my desktop on another folder, and here we go. Palm Leaves Brielle Fantasy ABR. An ABR file is a brush file. This is not. An ABR file is a brush file. I'm going to drag it into my Photoshop folder. So now I've got that in there. So I'm going to load up that file. So I'm going to click the drop down where you would choose your size, go to the gear, go to load, or it's import under brushes, and then go to your folder. So there's my folder. It's looking for an ABR file, and there's my palm leaves. So now I can scroll down. I have to close this and scroll all the way to the bottom, and then there it is, Palm Leaves Brielle Fantasy. I'll open it up, and then these have these leaves in here. I'm just going to choose the top one. I'm going to double click and come over here. Wow, that's a big one. I'm going to use my brackets and make it smaller. So you can see this is my little brush. Now, thing to know about brushes is there is a window panel called Brushes and Brush Settings. They're kind of together. They hang out together here. Brushes and Brush Settings. Under Brush Settings, you have a way to move the angle of your brush. So like I just put that one on there, and then I can go this direction, and I can put one that's going this way. And I can put this direction, and I've got one now that's going this way. So you can use this to rotate those instead of having to make like a completely separate layer, which you could stamp it on its own layer and press Ctrl-T. But if I'm just trying to create a little pattern, then I can just stamp them on my layer that I already have for all of my brush strokes. Okay, now I'm going to take this little leaf pattern, and I'm going to take a chunk out of part of my letters using it. That's going to only happen with the eraser. And we've done a little bit with this in the past. So I'm going to come to my Tanya layer. You cannot use an eraser. So I'm on my eraser now, and it has the big no sign. You cannot use the eraser on shapes or text. You can only use that on rasterized layers, like brush stroke layers, where you've brushed things, or picture layers that you've drug in. So I need to make this not be a text layer anymore. To do that, I'm going to right-click this layer, and I'm going to rasterize this type. It's going to rasterize that layer. So now, see, it doesn't have a T in front of it. So now it's actually as if I drew it on there, okay? Or as if I drug it over instead of it being text. So now I can take my brush. So I've got my eraser. I'm going to load up my little palm leaf brush. I'll choose number 8 this time. We'll see what it looks like. It's really big, so I can't see it because of this size of it. So I'm scaling it down until it shows up again. There we go. That shows up. I don't like that one. Let's try a different one. Again, scale it down if you're not seeing it. It just may be too big. Okay, so let's say I want to use this to take a chunk out of this letter, just to give it kind of a funny little edge. I've already rasterized it. And if it's the direction I want it to be, let's say I want to flip it around. Say I want to use this part or whatever. You can flip it. Anyway, and then you're just going to click like one time. Think like a cookie cutter. So with my eraser, I'm brushing this. So I'm clicking one time. There. So I just chopped it. Now if I turn the stroke off, you can kind of see what's really happening here. I'm going to come over to this side. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom corner of this one. I'm going to rotate this brush just a little bit. There we go. So let's say like so. There we are. We'll do a little bit here on the end. Oops, there's a little piece I don't want out there. Maybe we'll just completely like on the O, like it got run into. And again, just rotate your brush around, try some different ones, maybe change the size, you know, just to make it look a little bit different. And you really don't want any little leftover pieces, so it's kind of best to get rid of those. All right, let's say that I'm happy with this. I'll put one more in there. Get rid of that. All right, there we go. Okay, now if I turn my stroke back on, you can see it goes around wherever all your cutouts are, which is why you don't want a really complicated or thick shape. Now you may want to double click your stroke and make it not be so big, so it's not quite so annoying. But there you go. So that is rasterized type. And again, you cannot erase type or shape layers. You have to rasterize the layer. That's right click and rasterize the layer. Then it's not considered text, or if it was a shape, it's not considered a shape anymore. All right, let me go ahead and add one more thing to this one. We're going to add a drop shadow. Let me add a little bit of distance and spread here. I'm going to pick this up and scoot it just a little bit. There we go. All right. So I've got my drop shadow on this one. I'm also going to add a drop shadow to all of my millions of brush strokes up here. Again, FX, drop shadow. We've got that on here. What I want to show you now is how global light works. So I've talked about this before. If I have global light turned on, then when I move this, notice every single shadow on the page moves. If global light is check marked, you're moving the sun basically. And so it's going to move it for every single layer. If I only want this one to be the one I control, then I would uncheck use global light for these leaves that I'm working on now, and it will leave this one alone. So I'm going to uncheck it. Now, like I can pick this up and move it around. Now, if I have this global light on, if I pick it up, move it around, it's going to mess, well, I can't do it now because I already messed with it, but it's going to move the other one too. See, it's going to start moving. They're all going to move together. So global light, let me move this one back. So global light will then move everything. If we don't have global light checked, we can move it separately. So I'm going to make that shadow go that way, this shadow go this way. And in order to do that, I have to uncheck use global light for that second one. I'm going to press Control and the number 1 after I hit OK here to fit this to my screen so I can see it. And there we go. All right. So that's pretty much most of what's left here on this lesson. I'm going to do one more little thing. I'm going to put my last name, Skinner, and I'm going to press Control A to select all letters here and then scale this down a little bit. Okay. All right, so let's scoot this up. All right. So the last thing that we want to do here is how do we move multiple things at the same time? We've talked about this before, but just as a review, if you want to move multiple layers, 2 or more layers at the same time, you do have to click on the space out here to the right of the layer. So here is this layer. I'm going to click over here to the right, and then here's this layer, and I'm going to click over to the right. So choose one, and then hold down the Control key and choose the other one. When they're both lit up like this, if you're on your Move tool, then you can move the whole mess around. And then you don't have to worry about like merging them together or anything like that. They're just temporarily connected to one another. Okay, and then again, if you wanted to punch out something on your letters, so I'm going to click on my name, I would have to rasterize the text so that it's not considered text anymore. Again, that's right click, rasterize type. And then again, if you're going to punch something out, you can. Again, I'm going to pop back out in here to these Photoshop brushes. So let me do brushes, and let's say symbols. See what kind of symbols we got in here. So here's a hand-drawn, some nice little brushes and arrows. So again, scroll down, hit download, save, click it, extract all, extract to the desktop, and then find the one that you're looking for. Now, this is probably good that this happened. So this particular one does not have a PAT file, and it does not have a brush file in it. So like in this particular instance, I was looking for a brush. Well, this one didn't come with a brush. They kind of lied to us. This happens sometimes. If this happens, you can technically turn something into a brush. I don't know why you would on this one because this is all kinds of colors. But you can technically turn something into a brush. If you open it with Photoshop, you can say open with Photoshop. It opens it. And then you can select everything here and define a brush preset. So select all, and then edit, define brush preset. And then I could name it flower thing. Okay. Now if I come over here, I should be able to load up flower thing. It's really big, so let me scale it down. There we go. And then here's my little flower thing brush. So at this point, I could draw on here. Let's say I'm going to put it next to the S instead of like poking out on the S. This one's kind of very fuzzy, so I'm going to click and double click like multiple times to kind of get it better. See, like that's a terrible brush. So I don't even know why they made that a brush, but that's how that works. So you can create your own brush. You really could just create your own file for that matter and just make a square, because most brushes are going to be square. Whatever size this is pretty close to what size the brush will end up being. It's just best if your brush is black, because it's just going to show up better. So let's say I want to make this, you know, weird little whatever this is, be my brush, this is a terrible brush, right? I would just say select all, edit, define brush preset, call it blob or whatever, and now I have this blobby brush that I could come in here, and you can see it's already loaded up, and I could use my blobby brush on here. Or of course I can change the color and use it as well. Or if I wanted to rotate it around, I can rotate it around through here before I use it and then pop it on there. Okay, so again, ABR files for brushes and PAT files for patterns. As we did on this other one, if you add a pattern overlay that's black and white and you want it to look different, you're going to change the blend mode. This blend mode here is going to give you different options. Screen is a lighter, multiply is a darker, which then takes that darker color underneath. And of course you can modify that scale up or down. All right, that should cover the majority of what we had not covered yet from that first page of Photoshop Note Sheet number 2. I am hoping that you have done this with me and you've got something that looks sort of like this. You've got your own brush strokes up here and some downloaded and loaded brush that you've used as stamps. This all has a nice little drop shadow. This drop shadow goes one direction. The drop shadow on your text is going to go another. And then you've created your own little brushes here and stamped those onto a rasterized last name layer in addition to those other items. Be sure to save.